for all of those who are listening, you can think to yourself, hey, well, what's a set of skills or a business or what opportunity can I focus in on, get really, really good at to create that income, that wealth? And then how can I then go spread it around in order to make sure I can keep it, my family can keep it, and all those good things can come from it. Welcome to the Name Your Number Show presented by the Investor Mindset. I'm Stephen Pesavento, and today I have JR Butler in the studio. How you doing, JR?
Great, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to dive into your story, JR, because, former athlete, former military, you're a guy who is on the grind, and you're helping other people take those same character skills and apply them into the sales space. We'll talk a little bit about that. But before we get into anything on what you're doing today, let's start off by what did you name first? What was one of the first targets that you really set after that you can remember back on to thinking, hey, this is a different path than most people are taking?
I would say, it started young, man. I wanted to be a Division I ice hockey player. That was the first goal I've ever had in my entire life. And I spent, 22 years pursuing it and achieving it. There's a lot of obviously hockey players that have that goal, but it's not a common goal for, everybody by any means.
Yeah, especially if you're not Canadian, it's not everybody's dream from day one. But what do you feel like it took, and what do you feel like you learned from committing to a goal like that, where, it takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of sacrifice?
Yeah. I think, my biggest lessons from growing up in that world and with that focus is discipline and consistency, I would say, no matter what, right? Like, you're going to have bad days. You're going to have bad losses. There's going to be stuff that you can't control that goes wrong. But if you have the discipline to continue to do the things that are going to get you to your goal and the consistency to do those things every single day, no matter what, that's critical, right? Like we hear a lot about motivation, and I think motivation is important, but motivation isn't, discipline eats motivation for breakfast. Because I don't know about you, I don't wake up every day motivated. We got bad
Not at
days,
all.
but if I have the discipline and I know what I need to do, then I'm going to get it done, and I'm going to get it done every day. And that's the only way I think you can achieve any big goal that you have in your life.
I couldn't agree more. Motivation gets you up, but discipline keeps you going. Discipline is that habit that every single day you're going to do the thing, no matter if you want to do it or not. What do you recommend to those people? Because, I know when you're recruiting and you're training, you're working with athletes, you're working with ex-military, you're working with folks who have already built that habit of discipline so that you're able to then layer on a set of skills that is going to allow them to be successful and help that business be successful. But what do you recommend to those people who feel like, maybe they weren't athletes, they weren't military, they don't have that skill, that habit built? What do you recommend to those people to start laying that foundation for discipline?
I think, like anything, right? You want to break up a bigger goal into littler goals, right? So like pick a habit that you're struggling with. It can either be a bad habit or a good habit that you want to develop, and just focus on that one specific thing and do it every single day. And, discipline, I think discipline is a muscle that you have to develop like anything else. So you start with something small, get used to doing it every single day, and then you layer on to that, right? And there's always like tips and tricks around how you develop that good habit. It could be rewarding yourself. It could be, putting it around something that you're already doing, like those types of things. But I think you've got to pick one small thing that you want to do every day and do it every day. And then it's easier and easier to layer on other things that you want to be disciplined about. And eventually discipline becomes a habit, which is what you need to develop any other habit, right? So I think it's like anything else. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah. And I feel like it's different for different people. But for me personally, when it comes to discipline, I'm much better at just saying, no, I'm no longer doing that. I'm not going to eat this kind of food. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do any of these things, because for me, I'm either an on or an off person. What have you found for yourself has as far as your personality and what you see within a lot of very successful athletes and veterans?
You're going to love this. The same way. I have a tattoo on my rib cage. It says, "How you do anything is how you do everything." Right. In the words of my mom, who's a Massachusetts woman, JR, you don't have a dimmer, right? Meaning like I'm on or off, right? So for me, I'm the same exact way. Like if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it 110%. I've been sober for 11 years. And I got that tattoo when I had 1 year of sobriety. And for me, it's a reminder that I see every single day that reminds me that I need to pick the stuff I do carefully because I'm addicted to my environment, right? So like
Yeah,
whatever I do, I'm going to do like overdo, right?
a lot. A
Yes,
lot. Yeah.
exactly. So, and by the way, like most successful people are that way. So you have to pick your habits, who you spend time with, how you spend your time very, very carefully, because you're probably going to overdo that thing pretty consistently. So I'm the exact same way, and I built in a reminder for myself to make sure that I don't pick up the wrong things.
It's a superpower, really. I mean, being addicted to the right things is the key. Choosing those things that are going to help push you forward, make you happier, healthier, better, have better relationships. It's choosing to do those things over choosing to spend Friday, Saturday, Thursday nights doing things that aren't going to help support you on your goals. You don't really realize until you step out of those habits and step into a different environment how much those things are truly impacting you.
Totally, 100%. You've got to be able to have that introspection to really understand what you're overdoing and if it's the right thing to be overdoing.
Yeah, that's so true. So you're a guy, you've had some success. You've been in sales for many years. You've played different roles. You've gone off. You started your own company. You've been bringing people together, kind of sharing these ideas, these strategies, helping people kind of take their life to another level. What is the life that you're dreaming of creating? What does that look like? What's important to you? How do you want to spend time with your loved ones? What is this all for?
I think, listen, at the end of the day, right, it's you want to have the freedom to do what you want. And really what you're asking me is, what do I want to do? I want to help people that are struggling with the same things that I've struggled with in my life, right? That's why we focus on the transition out of athletics and out of the military. I struggled with the transition out of athletics. I've got family members and very close friends that have struggled with the transition out of military. It's very similar. And I also, as a sales leader for 15 years, struggled with building like really talented teams that could execute. So my vision is building an organization and company that can help these folks, either transition or find the right people. From a family perspective, I'm a new dad, 4 months into it. And I want, my son to get some of the same great lessons that we give to the people we work with, right? Like the number one most important thing in life to have is a purpose. And if you have a purpose, then you can get dialed in around that purpose. And that's really like, obviously I was a hockey player. I have brothers that were hockey players. My dad's a Hall of Fame hockey coach. I would love for my son to be a hockey player, but if he chooses something else, I don't care, as long as he is dialed in the way I was to my purpose. And same thing with careers, right? If he wants to be a teacher, I want him to want to be the best teacher in the entire world. So that's really my dream, is that I can share with people the ability to find a purpose and get dialed in around that purpose. That's like, if I could wave a magic wand, that's what my life's going to look like in 10, 15 years. Obviously I want to be present for my family, and, all those things are really important. And a lot of that is about building a really successful business as a leader so that I can be present and affect as many people as I possibly can.
It's such an important thing. Purpose leads to fulfillment. Purpose leads to happiness. Purpose leads to having that motivation to get up. Purpose leads to being able to create the discipline to be able to go and do those things. Yet when I go out into the world and if I step into a room of business owners and I ask them, do you love what you do? Do you have a purpose in your life? Many of them say yes. Many of them are very clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it. And they love what they do. Yet when I step out into the average normal world and I talk to regular people, it's rare that people are really clear. A lot of people are floating through life. And I personally believe one of the reasons that so many people are unhappy or depressed or dealing with mental illness and unhappiness is because they don't have that purpose. They're not clear what they're here for, and they feel like they're just going through the motions. So what do you recommend to people who are trying to get clear on their purpose so they can really get on that path towards creating a great life?
I think number one, it starts with introspection and developing self-awareness, right? People don't want to hear this, but there are trade-offs that you have to make, right? And you have to decide where you're going to make those trade-offs. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. Not everybody wants to do what it takes to be a millionaire. And that's okay, right? If work-life balance, living in a certain place, if those things are your priorities, you need to determine that those are your priorities, and you need to be okay letting other areas fall off, right? And I think understanding where you fall on the values perspective of like what your life looks like, if it's where you live, how much you work, how much money you make, that's the first thing you need to understand, right? And you also need to understand what your strengths are and what your gaps are as a person. I think obviously, if you have a growth mindset, you believe you can become good at anything. And I think that's true, but there are also like behavioral and personality things that you're just never going to change. And I think it's pretty important to understand what those things are for you. So that's like where it all starts is understanding what you want your life to look like, and what tool set do you have to go get that. And then it's about like putting a plan together, right? And executing that plan. And then, once you have that should guide your purpose, right? The one thing I'll say that I think people get confused about is there is a difference between purpose and passion. And it's like the fallacy of young people sometimes, and it's older people's faults, because older people tell people to follow their passion. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe you follow your passion. I believe you work for it. I was a sociology major with a minor in art history and sign language and didn't own a computer. And then I spent 16 years selling very complex IT solutions to the biggest companies in the world. And I was super passionate about it. I did not stand up in front of seventh grade and say, I cannot wait to be an IT salesperson someday.
Yeah.
I know guys and girls that work in insurance sales, that work in, whatever industry, melting iron ore. I don't care. They're not passionate about it. Or they didn't get into it because they were passionate about it. They had a purpose that they wanted to achieve. They realized that this was a vertical that they could achieve it in. And that's how they developed the passion for it, right? So that's a big and really important delineation between purpose and passion that I don't think is really understood for folks that are early in their career and their lives.
Yeah, it really is misunderstood, because there is something about being passionate about your work. Yet oftentimes when you get really good at something and you find the right audience, the right customer base, the right product, when you're really good at something and then you find something that you do actually care about, you get passionate about it because you start seeing what the results can be. I know for me, when it comes to, running a real estate firm, running funds, helping people be able to make those investments, I'm not passionate about funds. I'm not passionate about running numbers and doing all this analytical stuff. But I'm super passionate about what it can do for people. I'm super passionate about what happens when somebody starts to take ownership and control of their life, when they get clear on what their purpose and vision is, when they understand and name their number about what they actually need to live and go through the process of creating a plan, like that's exciting, but you only really get to that point of finding that passion by being on the journey and taking those steps. And so oftentimes people are staying still, staying put in what they're doing because they're looking for that passion instead of getting really, really good at something and then letting those pieces come together.
It's so true. And you hit the nail on the head. You get passionate about the stuff you're good at. You get good at stuff by practicing, right? Like, it's not one and then the other. It's first it's practice, then the passion comes with achievement and mastering, right? That's an awesome way to put it.
When it comes to the folks that you're working with, I know one of the reasons you've chosen to work with athletes, to work with veterans, is because you have a personal connection. But I know another reason is because when you want to build an A team, when you want to bring the best people together, character and already having that determination, that grit, that discipline is so key because you can layer on those skills on top of it. What should somebody who's listening, who wants to step in and become the best at what they do and really build those skills and put in that effort and that work, what should they do? Where should they start? And what should be the thing that they think about every single day as they're on that path?
So the term that I use a lot is I call it, being dialed in, right? And it's if you played sports or you served in the military, I don't have to explain what that means to you. Some people you do, right? And that's like kind of step one is like, what does it mean to be dialed in? It means that you have a purpose, you have a plan, and you're doing whatever it takes to achieve that plan. So I think for somebody that wants to be excellent at anything, you have to figure out what being dialed in looks like for you as an individual, right? How does that mean that you spend your day? What time do you wake up? When do you go to bed? And what are you doing between those two activities? And I think if you can't, and you said some of the reasons we focus on athletes and veterans, but that's the number one reason is I don't need to explain to them what being dialed in means. And to be excellent at anything, you've got to be dialed in. My father, I mentioned, was a hockey coach. He used to say to us when we were little, like I'm talking 7, 8 years old. He used to say, there's a lot of people that play hockey. There's not a lot of hockey players. And there's a difference there, right? Mm. The hockey players live, breathe, sleep hockey. And that's when they make a decision, whatever that decision is, that context of that identity is how they make that decision. I'm not going to this party on Friday night. I'm not getting in this car. I'm not going to that this weekend, right? So I think it comes down to like figuring out, starting where we talked about earlier, and then figuring out what it takes to be there and being dialed into it every single day. That's how you can become excellent. I don't care what you want to do, but you should want to really be excellent at whatever it is you decide.
Yeah, a healthy obsession really does go far. And athletes have developed that. That's the reason they were successful in the first place.
Totally.
So, when I'm like you, I love really going deep into things. I love getting obsessed. I love grinding. I want to create something that's really impactful. And then during the pandemic, I sold my house. I went out, was living in Hawaii because, I found a back door and it was unbelievably affordable because nobody else was on the island. But I met this gentleman and he was retired. He was a builder and he owned the Airbnb that we were living in. And he asked me this question because he saw how hard I was grinding. He said, well, what's your number? What's that point that it's going to be enough? And it really hit me. It really hit me from this point of, I'm in a business where the purpose of the business is to make money, right? We buy real estate, we grow the value, we create a return for investors. So at the core of it, there's kind of an unlimited potential that can grow within this business. But when he asked me that, it really hit me because although I have set those numbers, I've ignored every time I've hit it and I haven't really celebrated. I've just gone after the next thing. So I ask you this, what's your number, the point at which you've made it, that you don't have to work again? And what's less important is your actual number. If you want to share it here and you want to talk about those numbers publicly, I'd love to hear it. But what comes up for you when I ask you that? When I ask you that question, what's your number?
It's funny. So the first thing that comes up to me is like, if right now, if I was at my number, and I'll tell you my number, I don't care. But if I was already at that number, I don't think I would really change what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. I think I would do this exact same thing. I'd probably hire more people to help me do it.
Yeah.
But I would be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. So, which is cool, right? There's not a lot of people that can say that. But my number though, to really kind of like, stop. I would love to go and try to get on the senior tour for the PGA someday. I'm horrible. I just started golfing when I got sober when I was like 27, so I'm not very good. So I would really I'd have to dial in to make this happen by the time I turn 55. But if for me to go down that path, right, my number is $100 million. That's what I want. That's the number where I can kind of go focus on. I'd probably still do a lot of the same stuff I do in terms of getting in front of athletes and veterans and talking about how to successfully make a transition. But 100 million gets me on the putting green and the driving course, the driving range, a lot more than I am right now.
I love that. I appreciate the openness because I think it's really powerful to be able to unpack that. What does 100 million do for you?
For me, it's
why
like
100 million?
Yeah, for me, it's a couple things. One is like the generational impact it would have on, not me so much, and not even like my son or my kids, but their kids and their kids' kids. That I've was fortunate to because of hockey go to some, elite boarding school with a lot of like people with generational wealth. And I think that's a pretty like amazing impact you can have. So that's number one. Number two is like, socially being able to have an impact on, candidly, stuff that I never really thought of as being important before COVID, but, the government and policy and things like that, like when you have that type of money, you can really affect the way the world works. And if you don't think the world's working the way that it should, I think that's a number that you can impact that. And I would love someday to have that type of impact. So that's kind of where that number landed from, was the generational impact it can have and the social impact it can have. And not to say you can't do it at a smaller number, but I think you really move the needle at $100 million, right? And you can kind of do what you want to do, even if a lot of people that are loud about their opinions disagree with you. And I think that's one of the problems we have today, is those are the type of people that are making decisions, and they're not always the people we agree with. And I'm not picking a side here. I'm just saying, like, I
think having that type of wealth is extremely defensible, because it's way more money than you actually need to live, but you can live essentially whatever level of life you want. You can do the yachts, you can do the jets, you can do anything in between. What I'm curious about, to unpack this a little bit further, is how much would you need every single month to kind of live unlimited with all the things that you're dreaming about, you're giving, you're buying back your time, you're buying those experiences? Is that 20,000 a month? Is that 50,000 a month? What would you need for your family to live that life?
Not a lot, probably, $100,000 a month, I think would be like put me in a place where I'm like very, very comfortable and still, have budget left over to have the impact that I would want to have socially.
What's so cool just to recognize is that if you need $100,000 a month, and you're going to make that money come in passively from your investments, you're retired, you probably still own your business and it's operating because you got some people in it. But with $12 million invested at 10%, you can be making $100,000 a month on those. And so it's fascinating because it doesn't actually take as much as we think it takes in order to get and create the life that we want to create. Yet by going for that $100 million number, you've got something that's so high up there that even if you fail and only make 10% of that, you're still creating an unbelievable life.
That's right. That's right.
When you look at what's next for you on the path to getting there, how is investing going to play a role? How is growing your business going to play a role? And what other factors are going to go into helping you create that?
Yeah, I think like number one opportunity for me to get there is creating enterprise value in my organization, right? Creating a sustainable, profitable, efficient business that can continue to scale the way we have, a couple years in, and then getting to the point where you have that outcome, whether that's an IPO or an acquisition, whatever it happens to be. Number two is the money that you do take out of the business on a monthly, quarterly basis. Like you said, putting that money to work, right? My father, on top of coaching, is a mortgage broker, and my mother was a hairdresser, but got into real estate. So renting is a four-letter word in my household, and I've fortunately done a good job of making some good real estate investments that are already passively creating income for me. And then I've also put money into the market to work for me as well, right? So like, and if you look at that, right, you're talking about building an organization, leveraging real estate, and leveraging the market, right? Like that, you can't just do one, I don't think, because then you're over leveraged and you're not diversified. So that's always been a big belief for me, is like you need to kind of be thinking about all of those things, along with obviously saving too, right? Just in case. So for me, that's really what it looks like, is like, making the right decisions across those three areas. And that number isn't that crazy when you actually look at the opportunity that we're going after, the areas where you're investing in real estate, and the way the market grows. I think it's a very real opportunity.
Well, there's something I want to unpack or more so just highlight in what you shared, because I think the audience, many people may overlook it. There's something really powerful about consolidation, right? You're building a business. That business is going to grow in value exponentially based on hitting different metrics and being able to exit either IPO or private equity or whatever that buyout ends up looking like. That's where the biggest wealth is created, by consolidating into a strategy that you can understand, that you're comfortable with, in order to grow that wealth. And then by diversifying it in order to keep it, right? And so for all of those who are listening, you can think to yourself, hey, well, what's a set of skills or a business, or what opportunity can I focus in on, get really, really good at, to create that income, that wealth? And then how can I then go spread it around in order to make sure I can keep it, my family can keep it, and all those good things can come from it?
100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes back to what we started with: discipline and focus, right?
Yeah. There's so much more that I'd love to unpack with you, JR, but we've got one last question for today's interview. Before I get there, why don't you share with the audience how they can follow along with what you're doing with Shift, or follow you on social media?
Yeah, of course. I'm a good follow on LinkedIn. I tend to speak my mind pretty openly, especially now that nobody can fire me. So I'd say shoot me a follow on LinkedIn, just JR Butler. Website for our company, shiftgroup.io, and we're at Shift Athlete on all the social platforms. And we're a good follow. We put out some really, really cool content with some great former athletes, veterans, and folks that have had success in our program, and they get to hear me talk a little bit more as well.
Yeah, if you're listening and you have former athletes in your family or friends or retired military, this could be a great next step for them in their life to really be able to grow. So definitely check out Shift Group. So we'll wrap on this, JR. Tell me, a lot of the audience is listening. They want to take that next step. They want to build the discipline. They want to get to that point where they're financially free, where they've got that passion. that they've built because they know their purpose, but they're afraid. They're fearful. They know they need to take that next step, but they haven't. What advice do you have for them?
Get over yourself. It comes down to your ego. Like, you're afraid because you're afraid of what other people are going to think of you when you fail. Nobody cares. This is a sobriety lesson for me, right? Like, a lot of the things that you have to get over when you stop using drugs and alcohol is what you think your friends are going to think of you because you're not drinking. And I realized somewhat early on in my sobriety that nobody cares what's in my cup. And that's kind of that's like the line, right? Nobody cares what's in your cup. Like, you get over yourself and go for it. Like, nobody's going to judge you if you fail except for yourself. So stop thinking that people care about what you're doing. They don't. Like, and that also should help you motivate yourself because you're the only person that cares. Full stop, right? That would be my biggest piece of advice is get over yourself.
And there's nothing more freeing than being able to do that. Well, JR, thanks so much for joining us for this episode. Thanks to all the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to watch another, here's one up top. And here's another great video right down below.